This is the Doc from SilverDoctors.com. We have Jim Willie on the line to discuss his thoughts on the Euro crisis and a variety of other topics affecting gold and silver. Jim Willie is the founder of GoldenJackass.com, where he releases weekly public reports exposing the corruption of the Western banking system, and also publishes a subscription newsletter called the Hat Trick Letter. Jim is no holds barred. He always calls it like he sees it. So, Jim, it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Well, it's nice to be on, Mr. Silver Doctor. I'm going to call you Doctor from here on. Don't call me Doctor. Just call me Jim Willie. Yeah, this is a very strange time. It's great to be on your show. It's nice to see that you're kicking off a radio show. It's long overdue. There's so much to discuss. It's really frightening what's going on, John.
Yeah, definitely agree. We had quite a Friday yesterday, Jim. How about we get right down to the euro and get into the euro? I mean, we saw a big downgrade of France, Spain, Italy. S&P has, 14 of the 16 Eurozone nations, they got negative outlook. Why don't we start by talking about the euro crisis?
Yeah, it seems like every few weeks there's another downgrade. The most important one that I noticed yesterday was France. And let's face it, Nicolas Sarkozy is in big trouble. He's actually trying to say the austerity plans that they have in place, some of the budget cuts that will fix the situation and make the economy more stable, make their financial system more stable, put it on better ground, and I think he's dead wrong. These guys, I don't understand, except to conclude that they're trying to force an economic and financial breakdown. These austerity plans are poison pills. They result in a worse recession. They result in more job cuts. They result in bigger deficits. It seems like they don't work, so they do it again. They don't work in Greece, so they do it again. We've done about 4 or 5 austerity plans put in place with Greece. Everything is getting worse. Probably have a 10% recession. Right now, Sarkozy is something like 14% behind his opponent, primary opponent, in the French presidential polls. I think he's going to be deposed. So anyway, back to the bond market. Yeah, so France got downgraded, lost its coveted AAA. Of course, I don't think there's more than one country in the world that deserves a AAA, and that's Germany. They still have trade surpluses. But France has lost its AAA, and what does that mean? It means that big banks are going to have to shed their bonds of French government debt, and it means a lot of pension funds. It means a lot of insurance funds. Just investment grade has been lost. There's something that's been missed, though, in this whole announcement, and that is that the Euro Financial Stabilization Facility, the EFSF, also issues bonds. And its AAA rating is now in jeopardy because I don't know how many different countries contribute toward that bond, but if you've got some downgrades in the leading nations behind the Stability Fund, it's going to be very difficult to sell those new EFSF bonds as AAA when they're being downgraded on their components. So this is going to be really dangerous, Doc. I just see nothing fixed and buying time.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we saw this week the Greek 1 year passed, what was it, 400%? 400% for a 1 year bond. I mean, Italy's going back above 7%.
Well, Spain and Italy got downgraded, and I think the more important one right now is Spain, even though Italy's been in the news more. Spain has not been downgraded too many times and has not really reached that critical 7% on the 10-year bond yield. But watch Italy and Spain both creep back up to 7%. There was a funny little line that I used to say to friends a few weeks ago. They'd say, well, gee, the European Central Bank is buying bonds, so buying those sovereign bonds. So why is the Italian bond yield heading towards 7%? I thought the Euro Central Bank was buying them. And I said, well, the Euro Central Bank is buying truckloads, but the European banks are selling boatloads. So the net is trouble and a net sale on those bonds. These are not fixable. I think we've got something like 1/3 of all the European sovereign bonds for the scheduled year to come from Italy. I mean, they've got some really big volumes. A year ago, when Greece was in the news almost every day, I remember reading some very shallow analysis. I mean, I don't pull punches, as you say. How many times did we read a year and a half ago that Italy's okay? They've got good ratios.
Yeah, the ratios aren't as bad, but the total volume's a lot worse.
That's exactly the point. Their ratio, the two ratios of importance are the debt, the total debt for the country divided by their economic size, the GDP, and the other is what percentage of their entire budget is in deficit. And we kept hearing Italy's okay, Italy's not so bad with the ratios, and I kept saying no. Wait till they try to float that giant volume. So, Doc, it's all about volume now, and the Euro Central Bank is unwilling participant in this process.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. One thing I'd wanted to ask you, in your weekly piece this week, the U.S. dollar paper Tiger, you had made a statement here, and I'll read your quote here. When the first Italian bank goes bust, a French bank, a German bank, and a London bank will all turn to dust immediately. One day later, a New York bank will follow to the glue factory. So with this big downgrade this weekend, how soon are we likely looking at first Italian bank going bust and this domino progression starting?
Wow.
Are we talking weeks,
timing
days?
Questions are the hardest. Definitely the hardest. I don't know. It could be a month. Back in early December, I thought it was going to be maybe early in the new year, like in the middle of January, late January, that the first Italian bank, and it looks like it's going to be UniCredit. UniCredit is just hanging on by threads. So we don't have full access to what their portfolio is, but all indications are that they're holding a lot of toxic paper, and they're shedding a lot of probably government bonds, and they're selling a lot at the Euro Central Bank window. It's really hard to say. I don't know. I've been focusing on a different approach regarding the breakdown, and I learned this back in '03 when a certain liberation of a nation took place to remove a certain tyrant in Baghdad. But it's basically the event schedule. So next on tap is UniCredit going bad, going bust, failing, turning to dust. And when that happens, look for at least another couple Italian banks to also go bust. And when that happens, look for the French banks to go bust. The three major French banks, Crédit Agricole, BNP Paribas, and Société Générale. And when that happens, look for at least one or two London banks to go bust. They're all interconnected. I've been putting out in my hat-trick letter reports graphs that show cross-border exposure, like how much Italian debt do French banks have? How much Spanish and Italian Greek debt do London banks have? Commerce Bank in Germany is not immune. They're gonna fall by the wayside. So all these banks are interconnected. I'd like to make one little final point regarding this important topic, and that is we hear constantly about counterparties for the derivatives that these banks own, and we hear that they offset. Like Bank A has credit derivatives for default of Bank B and vice versa, so they're both okay, they cancel out. Well, that's dead wrong. Dead wrong. They both die. They
Right.
don't help each other. It's like saying, well, this guy's drowning in a pool in the deep water, and so is his friend. Neither one can swim, but it'll cancel them out, and they'll both be okay. Well, that's a bunch of garbage. The counterparty risk is mutual and deadly. So when one or two banks...
Yeah, I definitely agree and see how that could happen. I mean, with the derivative system we have today, it's really just a big house of cards, and when one of those kegs or pillars is taken out, just there's nothing to support it anymore.
No, it's not. They take each other down. The shadow banking system is a mutual millstone. They all go down together, and that's why you saw with the Greek renegotiated bonds where they all agreed that okay, it'll be like a 35% haircut, or it'll be a 40% hair, or maybe it'd be a 50% bond loss. They declared that it would not be a default event. They even use the word redefinition. So the derivatives are deadly, and they're doing their utmost, the bank leaders, that is, they're doing their utmost to prevent a declaration of default. Because if you see one, you're going to find out that they don't help each other, they drag each other down. Simple as that, Doc.
Yeah, if you would have told me a year or two ago that Greece would have had a 50% default and it wouldn't be called a default, I thought you were crazy.
Well, that's what they're doing. They're just calling it a redefinition. They're playing a lot of games with the contract wording, and they're getting some objections from the suddenly responsible debt rating agencies, Fitch, Moody's, S&P, who are coming out and saying, you guys are just not legally correct. I'm expecting lawsuits from the holders of the derivative contracts, their insurance contracts. It's like saying, I've got a fire insurance policy on my house, and my whole back side burned down. But the agents come in and say, well, we're going to redefine what a fire is. No, that's not a fire. That's just extreme oxidation.
Right.
And you don't get your claim. And besides, the fire would just burn the whole neighborhood down. That's my analogy. These derivatives are very strange, very cryptic, and they're not going to go away. It's just mind-boggling. You can't point to any area of the financial world and say, well, that's stable, or that's doing well, or that has complete transparency and shows health. Nothing like that, Doc. Nothing.